Good evening, and welcome. Tonight, we're traveling back to a place that by every law of nature should never have become one of the greatest civilizations in history. Imagine standing on a lonely stretch of shallow water along the Adriatic coast. There are no fertile fields, no towering mountains rich with minerals, no mighty rivers carrying trade. Only endless marshes, muddy islands, salty winds, and quiet waves stretching toward the horizon. No king would choose to build a capital here. No merchant would dream of creating an empire here. No engineer would believe a great city could ever survive here. And yet, for more than 1,000 years, this impossible place became the richest republic in Europe. Its ships ruled the Mediterranean, its merchants connected east and west, its wealth amazed kings, its navy terrified rivals. This is the incredible story of Venice. But every great story begins with disaster. To understand Venice, we must first return to the final days of the Western Roman Empire. By the 5th century, Rome was no longer the unstoppable power it had once been. For hundreds of years, Roman soldiers guarded Europe with unmatched discipline. Massive roads connected prosperous cities. Trade flowed freely. Laws brought stability across vast territories. But nothing lasts forever. The empire had become too large to defend. Political corruption weakened the government. Generals fought each other for power. The borders slowly collapsed. Then came wave after wave of barbarian invasions. Among them was one name that filled entire civilizations with fear: Attila, known throughout history as Attila the Hun. His armies moved with terrifying speed. Mounted warriors crossed Europe like a storm, leaving burned villages, ruined cities, and frightened families behind them. People didn't wait for the Huns to arrive. They fled long before the first horse appeared on the horizon. Entire communities abandoned their homes. Generations of history were left behind in a desperate search for safety. Along the northeastern coast of Italy lived the ancient Veneti people. Their towns had once flourished under Roman protection. Now they faced destruction. Running inland meant facing the invaders. Standing and fighting meant certain death. Only one escape remained: the sea. Not the open sea, but a vast lagoon filled with tiny muddy islands. To most people, it looked like one of the worst places imaginable. The land shifted constantly. Salt water flooded everything. Mosquitoes filled the marshes. Fresh water was scarce. Farming was almost impossible. Yet it possessed one priceless advantage: an army on horseback could never follow them there. The confusing maze of shallow channels acted like a natural fortress. The refugees crossed into the lagoon, carrying only what they could hold in their hands. They believed they had lost everything. They had no idea they were laying the foundation for one of history's greatest republics. Life in the lagoon was unbelievably difficult. There were no stone streets, no marketplaces, no grand buildings, only scattered wooden huts standing on tiny islands surrounded by endless water. Every single day was a struggle for survival. Fishing became their lifeline. The sea provided food when the land could not. Soon they also discovered another treasure hidden beneath the shallow water: salt. Today, salt seems ordinary, but 1,500 years ago, it was one of the world's most valuable resources. Without refrigeration, salt preserved meat and fish for months. It made long-distance trade possible. Entire economies depended upon it. The refugees harvested salt from the shallow pools, trading it with nearby communities for grain, tools, timber, and everything they lacked. Little by little, their settlement began to grow. Yet one enormous problem remained: How do you build a permanent city on mud? Every heavy structure slowly sank beneath the surface. Stone buildings cracked, wooden houses shifted. The ground itself refused to support civilization. Most people would have abandoned the dream. The Venetians refused. Instead, they developed one of history's greatest engineering solutions. Workers cut thousands upon thousands of long wooden poles from forests on the mainland. Each pole was sharpened and driven deep into the soft mud until it reached the solid clay hidden far below. One pole became 10, 10 became hundreds, hundreds became millions. Beneath the future city grew an invisible forest of wooden foundations. Above these platforms, thick wooden platforms were constructed. Only then could stone buildings safely rise above the water. Even today, much of historic Venice still stands upon those ancient wooden foundations. The city wasn't built beside nature, it was built by understanding nature. Growing up in this strange environment changed the people forever. Children learned to row boats before they learned to ride horses. Canals became streets, boats replaced wagons, the sound of water replaced the sound of wheels. Every family depended upon the sea. Every journey required a boat. Every opportunity came from the water. Unlike other European cities that looked toward farmland, Venice looked toward the horizon. The sea became its road, its marketplace, its shield, its future. Without realizing it, the descendants of frightened refugees were becoming some of the greatest sailors the world would ever know. As years passed, the scattered island slowly transformed into a connected community. Wooden bridges linked neighborhoods, markets became busier, trade expanded. People no longer thought of themselves as temporary refugees. This was now their home. Yet another challenge soon appeared. Who would rule this growing city? The people had escaped kings. They had fled cruel rulers whose ambition had destroyed entire regions. They refused to place unlimited power into the hands of one man ever again. Yet without leadership, their fragile community could never survive. The solution they created would become one of the most remarkable political systems in medieval history. Instead of building a kingdom, they would build a republic, unlike any the world had ever seen. And that remarkable experiment would shape Venice for the next 1,000 years. The little community hidden within the Venetian lagoon had survived its most difficult years. What had begun as a desperate refuge for frightened families was slowly becoming something much greater. Wooden homes multiplied across the islands. Simple fishing villages transformed into busy trading settlements. Every sunrise brought more boats. Every year brought more people. The city was growing, but growth always brings new challenges. A village can survive without complex leadership. A city cannot. The people of Venice faced a question that would determine their future. Who should rule them? The answer seemed obvious. Most kingdoms had a king. Many cities obeyed a powerful lord. The Byzantine Empire appointed governors over distant provinces. But the Venetians remembered something their neighbors had forgotten. They had fled the ambitions of powerful rulers. They had escaped the violence caused by men who believed absolute power belonged to them. They had no desire to replace one tyrant with another. If Venice was going to survive, it needed a government unlike any Europe had ever seen. Around the 8th century, the leading families of Venice introduced a new office. Its leader would be called the Doge. The title came from the Latin word dux, meaning leader, but the title was carefully chosen. A Doge was not a king. He wore magnificent robes. He lived in a grand palace. Foreign ambassadors bowed before him. Yet beneath all the ceremony, his authority was carefully limited. Unlike kings elsewhere in Europe, the Doge could not pass his position to his children. His family would gain no automatic power. When he died, a completely new election would begin.
This single decision changed everything. Power belonged to the Republic, not to one bloodline. Choosing a new Doge became one of the most complicated elections in medieval history. The Venetians trusted no one completely. They believed that if elections were too simple, wealthy families could manipulate them. So they created an astonishing process. Names were selected by lottery. Those names selected others. Then another lottery followed. More voting came afterward. Round after round continued until only one final candidate remained. The process was intentionally confusing. It reduced corruption. It prevented wealthy nobles from controlling every outcome. The election itself became a masterpiece of political engineering. Perhaps no government in Europe worked harder to prevent one ambitious man from taking complete control. Even after becoming Doge, his freedom remained remarkably limited. Before taking office, he swore a lengthy oath. This oath listed everything he was forbidden to do. He could not make important decisions alone. He could not appoint family members to powerful offices. He could not spend state money without permission. He could not negotiate foreign treaties by himself. He couldn't even leave Venice without approval from the government. Imagine being the ruler of one of Europe's richest cities, yet needing permission simply to travel outside its walls. That was life as the Doge. He represented Venice, but he never controlled Venice. The true power rested elsewhere. It belonged to the city's wealthy merchant families. Unlike feudal nobles who earned fortunes through land and war, Venetian nobles became rich through commerce. Their ships crossed the Mediterranean. Their warehouses overflowed with valuable goods. Their fortunes depended upon peace, stable government, and profitable trade. War was expensive. Political chaos frightened merchants. A dictator threatened business. So they designed a government where no individual could dominate anyone else. The Republic itself became more important than any single person. At the center of this system stood the Great Council. It included hundreds of members drawn from Venice's noble families. Here, laws were debated, officials were chosen, policies were approved. The council represented the collective will of Venice's ruling class. It wasn't a democracy in the modern sense. Ordinary citizens had little influence, but compared to the kingdom surrounding it, Venice possessed an unusually balanced government. Power flowed through institutions, not personalities. That stability would become one of the greatest reasons for Venice's success. While neighboring kingdoms changed rulers through war and assassination, Venice quietly continued doing business, year after year, generation after generation. Yet even this remarkable system contained one final safeguard. The Venetians feared conspiracy almost as much as invasion. Success created enemies. Rival cities watched carefully. Foreign spies entered Venice disguised as merchants. Ambitious nobles sometimes dreamed of overthrowing the Republic. To defend itself, Venice created one of history's most mysterious organizations, the Council of Ten. Officially, it was only a small committee. Unofficially, it became the Republic's intelligence service. Its members investigated treason. They uncovered secret plots. They monitored dangerous political rivals. Across the city, stone and lion heads were built into public buildings. Each lion's mouth contained a narrow opening. Citizens could secretly place written accusations inside. Anonymous reports, hidden warnings, suspicions of corruption. The government examined every message carefully. Some were false, some revealed genuine conspiracies. No one knew who might be watching. That uncertainty became one of Venice's strongest weapons. Life inside the Republic was shaped by discipline. Merchants followed strict commercial rules. Officials answered to multiple councils. Even the Doge lived under constant observation. To outsiders, the system seemed overly complicated. To Venetians, it was the secret behind their survival. They had watched kingdoms collapse under ambitious rulers. They refused to repeat the same mistake. Instead of trusting individuals, they trusted institutions. Instead of celebrating kings, they celebrated the republic itself. That philosophy created extraordinary stability. For centuries, while much of Europe suffered civil wars and political chaos, Venice remained remarkably united, and with peace came prosperity. The city's merchants grew richer every year. Their ships sailed farther than ever before. Its influence spread across the Mediterranean. But another powerful empire watched these developments closely. Far to the east stood the magnificent city of Constantinople, capital of the Byzantine Empire, the wealthiest city on earth. At first, Venice would serve this ancient empire. Before long, it would challenge it, and that relationship would transform the future of both civilizations forever.
The Republic of Venice had found something few medieval states ever achieved: stability. Its government was carefully balanced. Its merchants were growing wealthier. Its ships sailed farther every year. But despite its growing confidence, Venice was not yet completely independent. Officially, the city still belonged to one of the greatest empires on earth, the Byzantine Empire. For centuries, Constantinople had been known as the Queen of Cities. Its towering walls had never fallen. Its churches glittered with gold. Its markets overflowed with silk, jewels, spices, and treasures brought from Asia. To people living in Western Europe, Constantinople seemed almost magical. It was richer, larger, and far more sophisticated than any city they had ever seen. And Venice stood directly between East and West. That unique position would soon change everything. In the early centuries of its existence, Venice remained loyal to the Byzantine emperor, at least on paper. The emperor ruled from distant Constantinople, hundreds of miles away across the Adriatic Sea. His officials rarely interfered in the daily affairs of the lagoon. This gave Venice something incredibly valuable: freedom. The city governed itself. Its merchants traded wherever opportunities appeared. Its leaders solved problems without waiting for orders from the East. Little by little, Venice learned how to act like an independent state, even while officially remaining part of the Byzantine world. It was the perfect arrangement. The Republic enjoyed imperial protection without surrendering local control. As Venice's fleet expanded, the Byzantine emperors began relying on Venetian sailors. The Mediterranean was becoming increasingly dangerous. Arab fleets threatened Christian shipping. Norman warriors attacked Byzantine territories. Pirates lurked among countless islands. The empire desperately needed experienced naval allies. Venice answered the call. Its ships fought beside Byzantine fleets. Its sailors defended imperial trade routes. But the Venetians were practical businessmen. Nothing was free. Whenever they offered military assistance, they expected generous rewards in return. And in the year 1082, those rewards changed history forever. The Byzantine Emperor Alexios I faced a desperate crisis. Powerful Norman armies threatened his empire. Without Venetian ships, he risked losing everything. To secure Venetians' loyalty, the emperor issued an extraordinary decree. Known as the Golden Bull, it granted Venetian merchants privileges unlike anything Europe had ever seen. Across much of the Byzantine Empire, Venetian traders could buy and sell goods without paying taxes. Imagine competing against local merchants while paying no customs fees, no import taxes, and almost no commercial restrictions. It was an economic miracle. Venetian merchants suddenly became the most competitive traders in the Mediterranean. Profits exploded. Ships multiplied. Warehouses filled with expensive cargo. Silk from China, pepper from India, cinnamon from Ceylon, glass from Syria, gold from Africa. Everything passed through Venetian hands. The city grew richer than anyone had imagined. But prosperity often creates jealousy. The people of Constantinople watched foreign merchants become wealthier inside their own capital.
Venetians received special privileges. Local traders struggled to compete. Resentment slowly spread through the city. Arguments turned into violence. Riots erupted. Venetian neighborhoods were attacked. Merchants who had once been welcomed now walked the streets with caution. The friendship between Venice and Byzantium slowly began to crumble. Neither side fully trusted the other anymore. Commerce had become competition, and competition often leads to conflict. While political tensions increased, Venice realized something important. Every great civilization possessed a powerful spiritual symbol. Rome had St. Peter. Constantinople celebrated its ancient Christian relics. Venice had none. The city's official saint patron was respected, but not famous. If Venice wished to stand beside the greatest cities in Christendom, it needed a symbol that inspired pilgrims, merchants, and rulers alike. The answer lay hundreds of miles away, in Alexandria, Egypt. There rested the body of Saint Mark the Evangelist, one of Christianity's most revered figures. There was only one problem. Alexandria was under Muslim rule. Obtaining the relic legally seemed impossible. So the Venetians considered another option: stealing it. In the year 828, two Venetian merchants secretly traveled to Alexandria. Their names have survived through history: Buono da Malamocco and Rustico da Torcello. Officially, they were ordinary traders. Unofficially, they carried one of the boldest missions ever attempted. Their goal was nothing less than bringing Saint Mark home to Venice. Through gifts, negotiation, and careful planning, they convinced local guardians to surrender the sacred remains. But escaping Egypt would prove far more difficult. Every ship leaving the harbor faced inspection by Muslim customs officials. Discovery would almost certainly mean imprisonment or worse. The merchants needed an ingenious plan. They placed the body of Saint Mark inside a large basket. Then they covered it completely with pork, layer after layer of raw pork. According to Islamic law, pork was considered unclean. When custom officers approached, the merchants quietly opened the basket. The smell alone was enough. The officials immediately stepped back in disgust. Unwilling to touch the forbidden meat, they waved the cargo through without further inspection. The ship sailed safely from Alexandria. One of history's greatest religious thefts had succeeded. When the vessel finally reached Venice, church bells rang throughout the lagoon. Crowds gathered along the canals. The arrival of Saint Mark transformed the Republic overnight. Venice was no longer simply a prosperous trading city. It had become one of Christianity's great pilgrimage destinations. Soon, construction began on a magnificent new church worthy of its sacred treasure, St. Mark's Basilica. Its golden mosaics reflected the artistic brilliance of Byzantium. Its domes dominated the skyline. Its beauty amazed visitors from every corner of Europe. The basilica became far more than a church. It became the spiritual heart of Venice. Along with St. Mark came another powerful symbol, the winged lion, representing courage, wisdom, and divine protection. Before long, the Lion of St. Mark appeared everywhere, on flags, coins, government buildings, warships, fortresses. Everywhere Venetian power reached, the lion followed. It reminded the world that this republic was no longer hiding in the shadows of greater empires. Venice had found its own identity, its own protector, its own destiny. The city, built by frightened refugees, had become a confident maritime republic. But wealth alone could not build an empire. To truly dominate the Mediterranean, Venice needed something even more powerful. The greatest shipyard the medieval world had ever seen, a place where entire fleets could be built faster than any rival imagined. It was called the Venetian Arsenal. And inside its towering walls, the future of the Republic would be forged.
Venice had found its identity. It possessed a stable government. It had earned enormous wealth through trade. The winged lion of St. Mark had become the proud symbol of the Republic. Yet the leaders of Venice understood one simple truth. Money alone could never protect an empire. Trade routes attracted pirates. Wealth invited powerful enemies. Every valuable cargo crossing the Mediterranean tempted rival cities to attack. If Venice wanted to survive, it needed complete control of the sea. That meant building the strongest navy in Europe. But there was one problem. Building warships during the Middle Ages was painfully slow. A single vessel often required months, sometimes even years, to complete. By the time a fleet was ready, the war might already be over. Venice needed something entirely different, something the medieval world had never seen before. Hidden behind massive brick walls on the eastern edge of the city stood the heart of Venetian power. It was called the Arsenal. To outsiders, it looked like an ordinary shipyard, but inside those walls, history was being rewritten. The Arsenal was more than a place where ships were built. It was the world's first great industrial complex. Centuries before the Industrial Revolution, Venice had already discovered the secret of mass production. Imagine walking through its enormous gates. The sound of hammers echoed across the canals. Thousands of skilled craftsmen worked day and night. Blacksmiths forged iron nails. Carpenters shaped giant wooden beams. Rope makers twisted endless lengths of heavy cord. Sailmakers stitched enormous white sails. Weaponsmiths crafted swords, crossbows, and later, powerful bronze cannons. Each worker performed only one specialized task. Instead of building one complete ship from beginning to end, they built thousands of identical parts. Everything was standardized. Every mast fit perfectly. Every rudder matched the next. Every oar measured exactly the same length. It was an idea centuries ahead of its time. When enough parts were ready, construction began. A wooden hull entered the arsenal through a canal. Slowly, it floated from one workshop to another. At the first station, workers installed the massive ribs of the ship. At the next, another team attached the deck. Farther along, sails were raised, rigging was tightened, weapons were loaded, cannons were secured. Food, water, and supplies filled the storage compartments. Like a modern assembly line, every team completed its task before the ship moved forward. By the time it reached the end of the canal, a fully armed warship was ready for sea. Visitors from across Europe could hardly believe what they witnessed. One famous story claimed that an entire galley was assembled, armed, and launched while an honored guest quietly enjoyed dinner. Whether completely true or slightly exaggerated, the message was clear. No city on earth built ships faster than Venice. The arsenal employed thousands of workers known as the arsenatli. They formed one of the most respected communities within the Republic. The government rewarded them generously. They received steady wages, secure housing, medical care, even pensions after retirement. In return, they offered absolute loyalty. Their skills remained a closely guarded state secret. Foreign visitors were rarely allowed inside. Spies constantly tried to discover the arsenal's methods. The Republic made sure they failed. The shipyard became one of the most heavily protected places in Europe because everyone understood one thing. The arsenal wasn't simply building ships, it was building Venice's future. As the fleet expanded, Venetian ships appeared across the Mediterranean. Merchant vessels carried silk from the east. War galleys protected valuable convoys. Pirates quickly learned an expensive lesson. Attacking Venetian merchants often meant facing heavily armed escorts. The Republic defended its commerce with relentless determination. Soon, few rivals dared challenge Venice on the open sea. The city that once hid from invading armies had become the master of the water. Every spring, the Republic celebrated its relationship with the sea through one of the most spectacular ceremonies in Europe. It was known as the Marriage to the Sea.
On the Feast of the Ascension, the Doge boarded a magnificent state vessel called the Bucentoro. It was unlike any ordinary ship. Its sides glittered with gold leaf. Beautiful carvings decorated every surface. Musicians played while banners fluttered above the deck. Hundreds of smaller boats followed behind in a breathtaking procession. The canals overflowed with cheering citizens. Foreign ambassadors watched in amazement. Slowly, the grand fleet sailed toward the entrance of the Adriatic Sea. There, the Doge stood before the assembled crowd. In his hand rested a golden ring. He raised it high above the waves. Then he spoke ancient words that echoed across generations. "We wed thee, O sea, as a sign of our true and everlasting dominion." With that, he dropped the ring into the water. The sea symbolically became Venice's eternal bride. It was a simple ceremony, yet it carried enormous meaning. The Republic believed its destiny was forever connected to the water. The sea had protected them, fed them, made them wealthy, and now it had become the foundation of an empire. As Venice celebrated its growing naval supremacy, events far beyond the lagoon were beginning to reshape Europe. In the Holy Land, Christian kingdoms struggled to survive. The Pope dreamed of launching another crusade. Thousands of knights prepared for war, but they faced one impossible obstacle. They needed ships, thousands of them. Only one city possessed the knowledge, the industry, and the fleet capable of transporting an entire army across the Mediterranean. That city was Venice. And soon, a remarkable old man named Enrico Dandolo would seize an opportunity that would forever change the history of both Venice and the Byzantine Empire.
By the beginning of the 13th century, Venice stood at the height of its power. Its merchant ships dominated the Mediterranean. Its arsenal could build warships faster than any rival. Its government was stable. Its treasury overflowed with silver and gold. To the rest of Europe, Venice was no longer a city of refugees. It had become the greatest maritime republic in Christendom. But in the year 1202, a single request arrived that would change the destiny of Venice forever. It came from the Pope himself. Pope Innocent III had announced a new crusade. Jerusalem remained under Muslim control, and Christian Europe was once again called to reclaim the Holy Land. Knights answered from France. Lords pledged their armies. Thousands of soldiers prepared for what they believed would be a sacred mission. But there was one enormous problem. The Holy Land lay across the Mediterranean Sea. An army of 30,000 men could not simply walk there. They needed hundreds of ships. Only one city possessed the fleet, the experience, and the industrial power to transport such a force: Venice. When the Crusader envoys arrived, they entered the magnificent halls of the Doge's palace. Waiting for them was one of the most extraordinary leaders in medieval history. His name was Enrico Dandolo. By this time, Dandolo was already in his 90s. He was almost completely blind. Many believed his age would make him weak. They could not have been more mistaken. Behind his cloudy eyes remained one of the sharpest political minds in Europe. He understood that this crusade could become the greatest opportunity Venice had ever received. The negotiations were intense. The Crusaders requested transportation for more than 30,000 soldiers, along with thousands of horses, weapons, food, and supplies. It would be one of the largest naval operations ever attempted. Venice agreed, but only for an enormous price: 85,000 silver marks. It was an astonishing sum, enough to finance the Republic for years. The Crusader leaders accepted without hesitation, confident that Europe's nobles would easily raise the money. Immediately, the arsenal sprang into action. For nearly an entire year, Venice placed almost all ordinary commerce on hold. Merchant ships remained in harbor. Shipbuilders worked day and night. Thousands of craftsmen produced new galleys. Carpenters shaped timber. Blacksmiths forged anchors. Sailmakers stitched enormous sails. Food was stored, weapons were loaded. Every resource of the Republic focused on one single project, the Crusade. It was one of the greatest industrial efforts medieval Europe had ever witnessed. Finally, during the summer of 1202, the Crusaders arrived. But something was terribly wrong. Far fewer soldiers appeared than expected. Many nobles had chosen different routes, others never came at all. Instead of 30,000 men, only a fraction stood waiting inside the Venetian harbor. Worse still, they did not have enough money. After collecting every coin they possessed, they still fell thousands of silver marks short of their agreement. Silence filled the city. Venice had already spent enormous fortunes building the fleet. The Republic expected payment. The Crusaders had none. Neither side knew what to do. For several tense days, the unfinished agreement threatened to destroy the entire expedition. The Crusaders could not leave. Venice could not recover its investment. Then, Enrico Dandolo proposed an extraordinary solution. Instead of paying with silver, the Crusaders could repay their debt with military service. Their first target would not be Jerusalem, nor Egypt. Instead, they would attack the city of Zara. Zara stood along the Adriatic coast. It was wealthy, strategically important, and most importantly, it had rebelled against Venetian authority. To Dandolo, this crusade presented the perfect opportunity to reclaim the city. Many crusaders were horrified. Zara was a Christian city. Its people followed the same faith. The Pope himself had forbidden any attack against fellow Christians. Some knights immediately refused. They abandoned the expedition rather than violate their sacred vows. Others struggled with their conscience, but they were trapped. Without Venice, their crusade was over. Reluctantly, most agreed. To strengthen their resolve, Enrico Dandolo made a decision that stunned everyone. Despite being elderly, despite being nearly blind, he personally took the Crusaders' cross. Standing before the people of Venice inside St. Mark's Basilica, the aged Doge declared that he would accompany the expedition himself. The entire church fell silent. A man approaching 100 years of age prepared to lead soldiers into war. His determination inspired thousands. Soon afterward, the enormous fleet finally left Venice. Hundreds of ships stretched across the sea. Their white sails disappeared beyond the horizon. The Fourth Crusade had begun, but its destination was already changing. In late autumn, the fleet reached Zara. The citizens watched in disbelief. Christian banners flew above the approaching ships. Surely they had come as allies. Instead, the Crusaders prepared for battle. The defenders raised crosses on their walls. They pleaded with the attackers, "We are Christians just like you." Their words changed nothing. The siege began. After only a short struggle, Zara fell. The city was looted, homes burned, churches were damaged. The Crusaders had won their first victory. Yet many believed they had already lost something far greater, their moral purpose. Winter arrived. The army remained inside the captured city. Snow covered the streets. Food became scarce. Arguments spread through the camp. Many wondered whether God still blessed their mission. Then, during those cold winter months, a mysterious visitor arrived. He was young, he wore royal clothing, and he carried a proposal that would completely transform the crusade. His name was Alexios Angelos Angelos, the exiled prince of the Byzantine Empire. He promised immeasurable wealth. He promised political power. He promised enough money to erase every crusader debt. But in return, he asked them to sail somewhere they had never intended to go. Not Jerusalem, not Egypt, but the greatest Christian city on earth, Constantinople. The decision they were about to make would alter the course of world history forever.
The winter winds swept through the streets of Zara. Inside the captured city, thousands of crusaders waited impatiently. They had left their homes believing they were on a sacred journey to liberate Jerusalem. Instead, they had attacked a Christian city. Many questioned whether they were still serving God or simply serving Venice. Then, one unexpected visitor changed everything. His name was Prince Alexios Angelos. He was young, nervous, and desperate. Alexios was the son of a former Byzantine emperor who had been overthrown. His father had been imprisoned, his throne stolen. Now the prince wanted it back. But he had no army, no navy, no power. Only one thing remained: a promise. Standing before the Crusader leaders and Doge Enrico Dandolo, Alexios made an astonishing offer. "If you help me reclaim the throne of Constantinople, I will pay your entire debt to Venice. I will provide supplies for your crusade. I will send thousands of Byzantine soldiers to fight beside you, and I will reunite the Eastern Orthodox Church with Rome." It sounded almost too good to be true. The Crusaders were tempted. Venice saw something even more valuable: Constantinople, the richest city on earth. For decades, Venetian merchants had traded there. They knew its enormous wealth. They knew its magnificent palaces, and they knew something else. Its defenses were no longer as strong as they once had been. For Enrico Dandolo, the opportunity was impossible to ignore. In the spring of 1203, the Great Fleet sailed once again. Hundreds of ships crossed the Aegean Sea. Weeks later, the towers of Constantinople appeared on the horizon. Even experienced soldiers stood speechless. Nothing in Europe compared to it. Massive stone walls stretched for miles. Golden church domes glittered beneath the sun. Thousands of ships filled the harbor. Nearly 500,000 people lived within its walls. For centuries, everyone believed Constantinople was unconquerable. Yet now, a Christian army stood outside its gates. The citizens could hardly believe their eyes. These were supposed to be crusaders, defenders of Christianity. Instead, they had arrived as invaders. The first attacks began almost immediately. Venetian ships sailed directly toward the massive sea walls. Using long ladders fixed to their masts, soldiers climbed from the decks onto the enemy fortifications. Meanwhile, the Crusader knights attacked from the land. Fires broke out across sections of the city. Smoke darkened the summer sky. Panic spread everywhere. Unable to organize an effective defense, the ruling emperor fled during the night. Without their leader, the city surrendered. Prince Alexios entered Constantinople in triumph. He became Emperor Alexios IV. The Crusaders believed their mission was complete. They expected immediate payment, but reality proved far more complicated. The imperial treasury was nearly empty. Years of corruption and civil war had drained the empire's wealth. Alexios simply did not possess the enormous fortune he had promised. He desperately tried to raise money. Taxes increased. Church treasures were melted down. Precious objects disappeared from sacred buildings. The people of Constantinople became furious. Many blamed the young emperor. Others blamed the foreign crusaders camped outside the walls. Hatred grew stronger each day. Soon, riots erupted across the capital. Violence spread through the streets. Several districts caught fire. The relationship between the Byzantines and the Crusaders completely collapsed. Before long, another revolution swept through the city. Alexios IV was overthrown. Then he was murdered. The Crusaders had lost their emperor, they had lost their payment, and they had lost every peaceful solution. Standing before his commanders, Enrico Dandolo reached a grim conclusion. If Constantinople would not pay willingly, it would pay by force. In April of 1204, the greatest assault in medieval history began. The Venetian fleet attacked first. Their ships advanced toward the towering sea walls.
Archers filled the sky with arrows. Crossbow bolts struck the defenders. Huge grappling hooks locked onto the battlements. One by one, Venetian soldiers climbed onto the walls. At the same time, the Crusader army launched a full-scale attack from land. Hours of desperate fighting followed. Finally, a section of the defenses collapsed. The gates opened. Thousands of Crusaders poured into the city. Constantinople, the proud capital of the Byzantine Empire, had fallen. What happened next shocked even many of the victors. For 3 terrible days, the city was abandoned to chaos. Palaces were looted, churches were stripped of gold, sacred relics disappeared forever. Precious manuscripts were burned apart. Homes were robbed, families fled through smoke-filled streets. One of the greatest cities in Christian history suffered unimaginable destruction at the hands of fellow Christians. It became one of the darkest chapters of the Crusades. While many crusaders seized land and castles, Venice chose something far more valuable: trade. The Republic claimed strategic ports throughout the eastern Mediterranean. It gained control of important islands. Most importantly, it acquired the island of Crete. Venetian merchants also carried home extraordinary treasures. Among them were 4 magnificent bronze horses taken from Constantinople's great hippodrome. These statues would later stand proudly above the entrance of St. Mark's Basilica, becoming one of Venice's most famous symbols. Gold, silver, silk, marble, jewels. The wealth flowing into Venice seemed endless. The Republic emerged richer than ever before. But something even greater had changed. The Byzantine Empire, once the guardian of Eastern Christendom, had been broken. It would never fully recover. Meanwhile, Venice was no longer simply a prosperous republic. It had become a true maritime empire. Its influence stretched across the Mediterranean. Its merchants controlled strategic ports. Its navy ruled the sea. The Lion of St. Mark had reached the height of its power. Yet every empire eventually faces a new rival, and soon another great maritime republic would rise to challenge Venice for control of the Mediterranean. Its name was Genoa. The struggle between these 2 mighty trading powers would last for generations and decide who truly ruled the sea.
The fall of Constantinople transformed Venice forever. The Republic had become richer than ever before. Its fleets controlled the sea. Its merchants dominated the markets of the eastern Mediterranean. But the leaders of Venice understood an important lesson. An empire built only on wealth could disappear overnight. To remain powerful, they needed something stronger: a network, a chain of ports stretching across the sea itself. Unlike other European kingdoms, Venice had little interest in conquering vast territories inland. Managing distant farms and castles required enormous armies. The Republic preferred something far more practical: strategic harbors, small islands, safe anchorages. Every possession had one purpose: protect trade. From the Adriatic Sea to the shores of Greece, Venice carefully selected locations that controlled the busiest shipping routes in the Mediterranean. One by one, they built an empire unlike any the world had ever seen. Not an empire of land, but an empire of water. The Venetians called it Stato da Mar, the state of the sea. Instead of ruling millions of people, they ruled the world's most valuable trade routes. Crete became their greatest overseas colony. Its central location allowed Venetian fleets to dominate the eastern Mediterranean. Corfu guarded the entrance to the Adriatic. Ports throughout Greece served as naval stations. Warehouses stored food, weapons, and merchandise. Merchant convoys could sail from one Venetian harbor to another without fear. Every possession had one purpose: protect trade. From the Adriatic Sea to the shores of Greece, Venice carefully selected locations that controlled the busiest shipping routes in the Mediterranean. One by one, they built an empire unlike any the world had ever seen. Not an empire of land, but an empire of water. The Venetians called it Stato da Mar, the state of the sea. Instead of ruling millions of people, they ruled the world's most valuable trade routes. Crete became their greatest overseas colony. Its central location allowed Venetian fleets to dominate the eastern Mediterranean. Corfu guarded the entrance to the Adriatic. Ports throughout Greece served as naval stations. Warehouses stored food, weapons, and merchandise. Merchant convoys could sail from one Venetian harbor to another without fear. Every island functioned like another link in an enormous chain. Together, they created one of history's greatest commercial empires. Each colony followed the same pattern. A Venetian governor arrived from the Republic. Soldiers protected the harbor. Merchants filled the marketplaces. Taxes flowed back to Venice. The local population generally continued speaking their own language and practicing their traditions. The Republic cared less about changing cultures and more about protecting commerce. For Venice, business always came first. As trade expanded, luxuries from the East poured into Europe. Silks from China, fine porcelain, exotic perfumes, rare gemstones. Most valuable of all, spices. Pepper, cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves. These tiny products were worth fortunes. A single sack of pepper could equal years of a worker's wages. The richer Venice became, the farther their merchants traveled. Some ventured beyond familiar waters, far beyond Persia, far beyond India, toward lands that most Europeans believed existed only in legends. In the year 1271, a 17-year-old Venetian boy prepared for the greatest journey of his life. His name was Marco Polo. Together with his father Niccolo and his uncle Maffeo, they left Venice in search of the mysterious East. No one knew exactly how long the journey would take. No one knew if they would ever return. The voyage was brutal. They crossed burning deserts where water was almost impossible to find. They climbed the freezing mountains of Central Asia. Weeks became months, months became years. Dust storms, bandits, disease, extreme heat, bitter cold. Every obstacle tested their determination. Yet they continued eastward, following the ancient Silk Road. Eventually, after nearly 4 years of travel, they reached the greatest empire on earth, China. At that time, China was ruled by one of history's most powerful men, Kublai Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan. His empire stretched across much of Asia. His capital amazed every foreign visitor. Marco Polo expected suspicion. Instead, he found curiosity. Kublai Khan was fascinated by the intelligent young Venetian. Marco spoke several languages. He observed everything carefully. He remembered every detail. The emperor quickly recognized his talents. Soon, Marco entered imperial service. For nearly 17 years, Marco Polo traveled throughout the Mongol Empire. He visited cities larger than any in Europe. He crossed enormous rivers. He explored distant provinces. He witnessed inventions Europeans had never imagined. Paper money, coal used as fuel, advanced postal systems, massive stone bridges, bustling markets filled with goods from across Asia. Everything seemed unbelievable. To a Venetian merchant, it felt like another world. When Kublai Khan finally allowed the Polo family to return home, they had been away for almost 24 years. The journey back proved just as dangerous. Pirates prowled the seas, storms threatened their ships, disease claimed many travelers. But eventually, their worn vessels entered the familiar waters of the Adriatic. Venice welcomed them home. Yet almost no one recognized them. Their clothes resembled those of foreign nomads. Their faces had changed. Many even believed they were imposters. According to legend, Marco Polo solved the mystery in an unforgettable way. During a grand dinner, he quietly cut open the seams of his worn travel clothes. Suddenly, rubies spilled onto the table. Diamonds followed, emeralds, sapphires, pearls. For years, the Polo family had secretly sewn precious gemstones inside their garments. The guests watched in stunned silence.
The travelers truly had returned from the richest lands on earth. But Marco Polo's greatest contribution was still to come. A few years later, Venice entered another brutal war, this time against its greatest rival, the Republic of Genoa. Soon, these two giants would fight one final struggle, a battle so desperate that the survival of Venice itself would hang in balance.
By the late 14th century, Venice stood at the height of its prosperity. Its merchant fleet stretched from England to the Black Sea. Its warehouses overflowed with silk, spices, silver, and precious gems. The Republic had become the wealthiest maritime power in Europe. But success always creates rivals, and none hated Venice more than another proud republic across the Ligurian coast, Genoa. For generations, the two cities had competed for the same markets, the same ports, the same customers. Whenever Venetian merchants opened a trading station, Genoese merchants appeared nearby. Whenever Venice gained an ally, Genoa searched for a way to break that alliance. The Mediterranean had become too small for both empires. Soon, competition turned into open war. The struggle between Venice and Genoa lasted for decades. Their fleets clashed across the Mediterranean. Battles erupted near Greece, the Black Sea, and along the coasts of Italy. Neither republic was willing to surrender. Every victory was followed by another war. Every peace agreement proved temporary. Both sides believed only one city could dominate Mediterranean commerce. Then, in the year 1378, the greatest conflict of all began. History would remember it as the War of Chioggia. At first, everything went terribly wrong for Venice. The Genoese fleet launched a brilliant surprise campaign. Instead of attacking distant colonies, they sailed directly into the Venetian lagoon itself. It was something no enemy had successfully accomplished before. The citizens watched in disbelief. Enemy warships now floated only a short distance from their homes. Fear spread throughout the Republic. The Genoese captured the important port of Chioggia. From there, they blocked Venice's access to the open sea. Merchant ships could no longer leave. Food supplies became scarce. Trade came to a halt. For a city whose entire existence depended upon the sea, it was a nightmare. Shops closed, prices soared, families worried about starvation. Many believed the Republic's 1,000-year history was about to end. The Genoese commander grew confident. He even sent a message to the Venetian Doge. According to legend, he declared that peace would come only after he had placed chains around the Lion of St. Mark itself. It was an insult unlike any Venice had ever received. But inside the city, hope was fading. Then, Venice made one final gamble. The Republic called back its greatest admiral, Vittor Pisani. Only months earlier, he had actually been imprisoned after an earlier military failure. Now, desperate citizens demanded his return. The government released him immediately. As Pisani walked through St. Mark's Square, crowds surrounded him. They begged him to save their city. He accepted the challenge. Pisani carefully studied the situation. The Genoese fleet occupied Chioggia, but there was one weakness. The enemy relied upon narrow sea channels to reach the open Adriatic. If those exits could somehow be blocked, the hunters would become the hunted. It was an incredibly risky plan, yet Venice had no better option. Under the cover of darkness, Venetian sailors gathered old merchant ships. Instead of loading them with cargo, they filled them with enormous stones. One by one, the vessels were quietly sailed toward the narrow channels. Then they were deliberately sunk. Massive wooden hulls settled beneath the water. The exits became completely blocked. When morning arrived, the Genoese discovered the shocking truth. They were trapped. Now the situation had completely reversed. Instead of besieging Venice, the Genoese fleet was itself under siege. No food entered the harbor, no reinforcements arrived, no escape remained.
Week after week, conditions worsened. Hunger spread through the enemy fleet. Disease appeared. Morale collapsed. Winter approached. The once proud Genoese sailors watched their supplies disappear. Venice simply waited, patiently, relentlessly. For nearly 6 exhausting months, the blockade continued. The Republic poured every remaining resource into the struggle. Ordinary citizens donated jewelry. Wealthy merchants financed new ships. Even priests encouraged the people to endure a little longer. Everyone understood the truth. If Venice lost this war, everything would disappear. Its independence, its trade, its future. Finally, the Genoese could endure no more. Starving and surrounded, they surrendered. The victory was absolute. The mighty Genoese fleet, once feared throughout the Mediterranean, had been completely defeated. Church bells rang across Venice. Crowds celebrated in every square. The impossible had happened. The Republic had survived its darkest hour. The War of Chioggia became a turning point in history. Although Genoa remained an important financial center, its dream of dominating the Mediterranean was over. Venice emerged as the undisputed queen of maritime commerce. For the next century, its merchant ships would carry the world's most valuable goods: silk, porcelain, jewels, and above all, spices. The Republic now controlled one of the richest trading systems ever created. Money poured into Venice like water through its canals. Magnificent marble palaces rose along the Grand Canal. Artists, architects, and musicians transformed the city into one of the most beautiful places on earth. It was truly the golden age of Venice. Yet, hidden beneath all that wealth, a silent danger was growing. Far away, Portuguese explorers searched for a new route to Asia. If they succeeded, they would destroy the very trade that had made Venice rich, and without realizing it, the Republic was already approaching the beginning of its long, beautiful, and inevitable decline.
After the victory over Genoa, Venice stood alone. No rival fleet could challenge its dominance. The Mediterranean had become the Republic's private highway. Merchant convoys sailed safely beneath the banner of the Winged Lion. Every successful voyage brought unimaginable wealth back to the floating city. Venice had become the commercial heart of Europe. But what exactly made Venice so rich? The answer wasn't gold. It wasn't silver. It wasn't even silk. It was something far smaller and far more valuable: spices. Today, pepper and cinnamon sit quietly on kitchen shelves. In medieval Europe, they were treasures. Black pepper preserved meat during long winters. Cinnamon flavored expensive banquets. Cloves and nutmeg were believed to cure diseases. Owning spices was a symbol of wealth and prestige. Some were literally worth their weight in gold. Kings wanted them. Nobles demanded them. Merchants became rich selling them, and Venice controlled nearly all of it. The journey of these precious spices began thousands of miles away, in the tropical forests of India, Sri Lanka, and the mysterious spice islands of Southeast Asia. Arab and Indian merchants carried them across the Indian Ocean. Camel caravans transported them through scorching deserts. Eventually, they reached the great ports of Alexandria in Egypt and Aleppo in Syria. There, Venetian merchants were waiting. Through carefully negotiated trade agreements and the protection of their powerful navy, they purchased enormous quantities of spices before anyone else could. Then the cargoes sailed westward, straight to Venice. The arrival of a spice convoy transformed the city. Church bells rang. Dock workers hurried to unload the ships. Warehouse doors swung open. The air itself became fragrant. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg. The entire waterfront smelled of distant lands. Merchants from every corner of Europe flooded into the markets. German traders, French nobles, English businessmen, Spanish buyers. Everyone came to Venice because only Venice could provide what they needed. The Republic carefully regulated every transaction. Officials weighed every sack.
Taxes were collected with remarkable efficiency. Nothing escaped government supervision. This discipline allowed Venice to become incredibly wealthy. The profits financed everything. Magnificent palaces rose along the Grand Canal. Artists received generous patronage. Libraries expanded. Universities flourished. The arsenal built even larger fleets. Venice became one of the most beautiful cities on earth. Its marble buildings reflected perfectly in the quiet canals. Foreign visitors believed they had entered a dream. Yet beneath all this beauty, the world was changing. A new danger was quietly approaching, not from the sea, not from Genoa, not from the Ottoman Empire, but from the land. On mainland Italy, powerful kingdoms were becoming stronger. Among them, the Duchy of Milan posed the greatest threat. If Milan controlled northern Italy, it could block Venice's food supplies. The Republic had always depended on imported grain. Without secure farmland, its people could starve. For the first time, Venice realized that sea power alone was no longer enough. Inside the Doge's palace, heated debates filled the council chambers. Some senators argued that Venice should remain faithful to its maritime traditions. They insisted, "Our future belongs to the sea." Others disagreed. "If we ignore the mainland, our enemies will surround us." Eventually, the second group prevailed. Venice made one of the most important decisions in its history. It would build not only an empire of the sea, but also an empire on land. During the 15th century, Venetian armies captured nearby cities: Padua, Vicenza, Verona. Rich farmland came under the Republic's control. The fertile plains supplied grain. The rivers strengthened transportation. Venice became safer than ever before. But these victories carried a hidden cost. Land wars were expensive. Unlike naval battles, they required large armies, professional soldiers, heavy cavalry, fortified castles. The Republic entered a completely different kind of warfare. Instead of relying on citizen soldiers, Venice hired professional mercenary commanders. These famous military leaders were known as Condottieri. They fought not for patriotism, but for contracts. Money determined their loyalty. A successful general could become incredibly wealthy. Sometimes he even switched sides if another ruler offered a better payment. This system deeply worried Venice. The Republic trusted no single individual with too much power. Even its greatest generals were carefully watched. Political officials monitored every campaign. The Council of Ten received constant reports. If anyone appeared too ambitious, the government acted without hesitation. One famous commander learned this lesson in the harshest way possible. His name was Francesco Busone Carmagnola. He won important victories for Venice. The people celebrated him as a hero. But eventually, the government began to suspect that he secretly communicated with Milan. Whether the accusations were true, no one can say with certainty. The Council of Ten made its decision. Carmagnola was invited back to Venice. He expected praise. Instead, he was arrested. After a secret trial, he was found guilty of treason. Soon afterward, he was publicly executed in St. Mark's Square. The message was unmistakable. In Venice, no individual stood above the Republic, not even its greatest hero. The Republic appeared stronger than ever. Its navy ruled the seas, its merchants controlled Europe's wealth, its mainland territories secured its food supply, its government remained remarkably stable. Everything suggested that Venice would continue prospering forever. But history rarely remains unchanged. Far beyond the Mediterranean, Portuguese sailors were searching for a new route around Africa. If they succeeded, Europe would no longer need Venice to reach the riches of Asia. The monopoly that had built the Republic's fortune was about to disappear forever.
For centuries, Venice had grown wealthy because it stood between East and West. Every valuable spice, every roll of silk, every precious cargo traveling from Asia to Europe passed through its ports. The Republic had mastered the Mediterranean. But history was about to change forever.
not because of war, not because of rebellion, but because of exploration. During the late 15th century, a small kingdom on the western edge of Europe had begun searching for a new route to Asia: Portugal. Unlike Venice, the Portuguese refused to rely on old trade networks. Their sailors pushed farther down the coast of Africa than anyone before them. Year after year, they explored unknown waters. They endured violent storms, scorching heat, starvation, disease. Many never returned, but their determination never faded. Then, in 1498, everything changed. A Portuguese navigator named Vasco da Gama finally reached India by sailing around the southern tip of Africa. For the first time in history, European merchants could buy spices directly from Asia. They no longer needed Venice. The Republic's greatest monopoly had vanished almost overnight. When the news reached Venice, shock spread across the city. Experienced merchants immediately understood the consequences. The future they had built for centuries was disappearing. Instead of unloading spices in Venice, Portuguese ships now carried them directly to Lisbon. Prices fell, profits disappeared, trade slowly shifted away from the Mediterranean toward the Atlantic Ocean. Venice tried desperately to respond. Its diplomats negotiated with foreign rulers. Its merchants searched for new opportunities. Some even proposed digging a canal through Egypt, connecting the Mediterranean to the Red Sea. It was an astonishingly ambitious idea, centuries ahead of its time. But the Republic lacked the resources to complete such a project. The world had already changed, and Venice could not stop it. As if this economic crisis were not enough, another powerful enemy continued expanding: the Ottoman Empire. After capturing Constantinople in 1453, the Ottomans gradually attacked Venice's overseas colonies. Island after island came under threat: Cyprus, Crete, Greek ports. The Republic fought bravely, but every war became more expensive. Every victory felt temporary. The empire that had once ruled the sea now struggled simply to defend itself. In 1571, one final moment of glory arrived. A coalition of Christian nations, known as the Holy League, joined forces against the Ottoman navy. Venice supplied many of the finest ships. The two fleets met near the Gulf of Patras. History remembers the battle as the Battle of Lepanto. More than 400 warships collided. Cannons thundered across the sea. Thousands of soldiers fought hand-to-hand upon crowded decks. Venice introduced enormous floating fortresses called galleasses. Their powerful artillery devastated the Ottoman fleet before the main battle even began. By sunset, the Holy League had won one of the greatest naval victories in European history. Church bells rang across Venice. The Republic celebrated. But beneath the celebration, leaders knew the truth. One battle could not restore the old world. Trade had already shifted westward. The Atlantic now mattered more than the Mediterranean. Gradually, Venice transformed itself. Instead of becoming Europe's richest commercial power, it became Europe's most beautiful city. Artists arrived from across the continent. Music filled the churches. Painters decorated magnificent palaces. Visitors admired the elegant Grand Canal. Masked festivals became famous throughout Europe. The Carnival of Venice attracted nobles from distant kingdoms. For weeks, people danced behind colorful masks. Social barriers disappeared. The city reinvented itself, no longer as an empire of merchants, but as an empire of culture. The 18th century became Venice's golden age of art. Composer Antonio Vivaldi filled the city with unforgettable music. Painters like Canaletto captured Venice's beauty in breathtaking detail. Travelers from Britain, France, Germany, and beyond considered Venice an essential destination. Its political influence had faded. Its beauty had become timeless.
Then came the greatest conqueror of his age, Napoleon Bonaparte. In 1797, French armies swept across northern Italy. The Republic declared neutrality, but neutrality meant nothing to Napoleon. He accused Venice of supporting his enemies. His soldiers advanced toward the lagoon. For the first time in nearly 1,000 years, a foreign army threatened Venice itself. Inside the Doge's palace, the Great Council gathered one final time. The senators faced an impossible choice: fight and watch their beloved city destroyed, or surrender and preserve what remained. With heavy hearts, they voted. The Republic would end. On May 12, 1797, the 1,000-year-old Republic of Venice officially ceased to exist. The last Doge, Ludovico Manin, quietly removed his ceremonial cap. Handing it to his servant, he spoke simple words filled with sorrow. "Take it. I shall never need it again." Soon afterward, French soldiers entered St. Mark's Square. The famous bronze horses were removed and taken to Paris. The magnificent state barge, the Bucentoro, was destroyed. One of history's longest-lasting republics had finally come to an end. Yet, Venice never truly disappeared. Its political power vanished, but its legacy endured. Its city's influence lives on in modern banking, international trade, accounting, public health. Even the word quarantine comes from Venetian policy. For centuries, ships arriving from distant lands were required to wait 40 days before entering the city. The Italian word for 40, quaranta, gave the word quarantine. Today, millions of travelers walk across the Rialto Bridge. They admire St. Mark's Basilica. They glide through silent canals on black gondolas. Few realize they are walking through the remains of one of history's greatest republics, a city born from frightened refugees, built on wooden piles driven into mud, a place with no farmland, no mines, and almost no natural resources. Yet through intelligence, discipline, hard work, and extraordinary ambition, Venice became one of the richest and most influential civilizations the world has ever known. Its empire has vanished, its fleets are gone, but the spirit of the most serene republic still echoes across every canal, every bridge, and every stone. And even today, the winged lion of St. Mark continues to remind the world that impossible dreams can sometimes become history.
When the Republic of Venice finally disappeared, many people believed the story ended. For more than 1,000 years, the winged lion of St. Mark had ruled the Adriatic. Now its banners had been lowered, its government dissolved, its proud republic erased from history. Yet, cities are different from empires. Empires can fall overnight. A city, especially one as extraordinary as Venice, continues to breathe. Napoleon did not remain in Venice for long. Only months after conquering the Republic, he treated the city like a bargaining chip. Without asking the people, without considering centuries of independence, he handed Venice over to Austria through the Treaty of Campo Formio. For the Venetians, it was another painful humiliation. After surviving Huns, Normans, pirates, Genoa, and the Ottoman Empire, their fate was now decided by distant rulers sitting around negotiation tables. The Austrian Empire governed Venice for many years. The old Doge's palace remained standing. St. Mark's Basilica still glittered beneath the sun. The canals remained unchanged, but something invisible had disappeared: freedom. The city that had once made its own laws now obeyed foreign emperors. Many Venetians never accepted foreign rule. Throughout the 19th century, the dream of independence refused to die. Secret political societies formed in quiet homes. Students whispered about liberty. Merchants remembered the proud republic their ancestors had built. When revolutions swept across Europe in 1848, Venice rose once again.
Citizens expelled Austrian officials. The Lion of St. Mark returned to public buildings. For a brief moment, the ancient republic seemed alive again. But hope was short-lived. The Austrian army surrounded the lagoon. Food became scarce. Disease spread through the crowded city. After months of resistance, Venice surrendered once more. Its people had fought bravely, yet they simply lacked the strength to defeat one of Europe's greatest military powers. Still, their courage inspired future generations. Finally, in 1866, history turned once again. Following Austria's defeat in another European war, Venice officially became part of the newly unified Kingdom of Italy. The Republic did not return, but the city finally escaped foreign occupation. For the first time in generations, Venice belonged to Italy. As political power faded, something unexpected happened. Artists, writers, musicians, and travelers began arriving from every corner of the world. They no longer came seeking spices, they came seeking beauty. The canals, the bridges, the silent gondolas gliding beneath ancient stone arches. Every narrow alley seemed untouched by time. Visitors felt as though they had stepped into another century. Venice slowly transformed from a commercial empire into one of the world's greatest cultural treasures. Its painters preserved its beauty on canvas. Its musicians filled churches with unforgettable melodies. Its architecture inspired generations of builders. Every marble palace reflected centuries of prosperity. Every weathered brick whispered stories of merchants, sailors, and explorers. The Republic was gone, but its spirit survived inside every street and every canal. Even today, when evening falls over the Grand Canal and the crowds begin to disappear, Venice becomes quiet once more. The gentle sound of water replaces the noise of modern life. Church bells echo across the lagoon, just as they did hundreds of years ago. For a brief moment, it becomes easy to imagine merchant ships returning from distant lands, their sails heavy with the winds of the Mediterranean, their cargo holds filled with spices from the east. The empire may have vanished, but the memory never truly fades.
As the 19th century slowly passed, Venice entered a completely different chapter of its history. No longer the ruler of an empire, it became something perhaps even more remarkable, a living monument. Unlike many ancient capitals that modernized beyond recognition, Venice seemed to resist time itself. Its streets remained waterways, its bridges remained stone, its palaces continued reflecting in the quiet canals just as they had for centuries. Walking through Venice felt less like entering a city and more like stepping into history itself. The merchants were gone. The great convoys no longer arrived from Alexandria. No spice fleets crowded the lagoon. The mighty arsenal, once capable of launching a warship in a single day, fell strangely silent. The hammering of thousands of shipbuilders disappeared. Its enormous workshops, which had once amazed kings and ambassadors, became quiet reminders of a forgotten industrial miracle. Nature slowly reclaimed what industry had once dominated. Yet Venice refused to become merely an old memory. Instead, it found a new purpose. Tourists replaced merchants, artists replaced admirals, historians replaced diplomats. People crossed oceans not to buy pepper or silk, but simply to witness the impossible city built upon water. Every visitor carried home the same feeling: wonder. The gondola, once an ordinary means of transportation, became one of the world's most recognizable symbols. Its elegant black hull glided silently beneath ancient bridges. The gondoliers continued traditions passed from father to son. Their rhythmic strokes echoed across canals that had witnessed 1,000 years of history. Very little had changed, and perhaps that was the greatest miracle of all. St. Mark's Square remained the heart of the city. Every morning, the first sunlight touched the golden mosaics of the basilica.
The great clock tower continued marking the passing hours. The campanile rose high above the rooftops, watching over the lagoon exactly as it had for generations. Visitors often paused, not because of noise, but because of silence. A peaceful silence almost impossible to find elsewhere in the modern world. The Doge's palace still stood proudly beside the water. Its marble arches seemed almost weightless. Inside its halls, history whispered from every wall. This was where merchants shaped empires, where ambassadors negotiated treaties, where the Council of Ten quietly decided the fate of powerful men. Every room carried memories of triumph and sacrifice. Across the Mediterranean, the Lion of St. Mark still remained carved in ancient fortresses. On the island of Crete, along the coast of Croatia, within the walls of Corfu, in Cyprus, travelers could still discover the unmistakable winged lion, a silent reminder that Venice had once ruled these distant shores. Empires vanished, stone endured. Historians often ask a simple question: how did such a small city accomplish so much? The answer was never luck. It was preparation, discipline, innovation. The Venetians understood something few others recognized. Power did not always come from armies. Sometimes it came from organization, from trust in institutions, from protecting commerce, from adapting faster than everyone else. Those principles allowed a city with almost no natural resources to dominate international trade for centuries. Even today, business schools study Venetian accounting, economists examine its banking systems, political scientists admire its remarkably stable government. Military historians continue analyzing the arsenal, the world's first great industrial shipbuilding complex. Long before the Industrial Revolution, Venice had already discovered the power of standardized production. Its ideas quietly shaped the modern world. As evening settles over the lagoon, golden light reflects across calm water. The crowds slowly disappear. The narrow canals grow peaceful. A gondola drifts silently beneath the Bridge of Sighs. For a moment, it almost feels as though nothing has changed, as though Marco Polo has only recently returned from the east, as though merchant ships still wait beyond the horizon, as though the winged lion still watches over the sea. Perhaps that's Venice's greatest achievement, not simply surviving history, but making history feel alive.
As the centuries passed, Venice slowly became quieter. The voices of merchants faded. The sounds of blacksmiths inside the arsenal disappeared. The grand fleets that once crossed the Mediterranean became part of history. Yet, beneath the calm surface of the lagoon, the city continued to guard its greatest secrets. Every building in Venice tells an extraordinary story. From the outside, the marble palaces appear timeless, strong, elegant, almost magical. But beneath every palace, hidden below the water, lies an invisible forest. Thousands upon thousands of wooden piles driven deep into the mud more than 1,000 years ago. Oak, larch, alder. Entire forests from northern Europe were brought to Venice. Each tree became part of the city's foundation. Without them, none of the magnificent churches, bridges, or palaces could exist. Ironically, the wood survived because it remained underwater. Without oxygen, the timber hardened instead of rotting. Nature itself became Venice's greatest architect. The city also mastered something few medieval societies ever understood: water management. Every canal served a purpose. The tides constantly flushed fresh water through the lagoon. Engineers carefully protected these delicate waterways for centuries. Too much silt, and ships could no longer sail. Too little fresh water, and the lagoon itself would disappear. The Venetians spent generations maintaining the perfect balance between land and sea. It was an endless battle against nature, one they fought every single day. Yet,
nature never truly surrendered. Even today, Venice continues to sink, ever so slowly. At the same time, the sea continues to rise. Powerful tides, known as acqua alta, sometimes flood St. Mark's Square. Water covers the ancient stones. Temporary walkways appear above the flooded streets. Visitors carefully cross them, while reflections of churches shimmer beneath their feet. It is both beautiful and fragile. To protect the city, modern engineers created one of Italy's largest engineering projects. Gigantic movable flood barriers, known as the Mose Project, stand beneath the sea. Whenever unusually high tides threaten Venice, these enormous gates rise from the seabed. For a short time, they separate the lagoon from the Adriatic Sea. It is a modern solution created to defend one of the oldest cities. Even today, Venice still depends upon human ingenuity, just as it did 1,500 years ago. But perhaps the greatest mystery of Venice is not its engineering, it is its atmosphere. No matter how many photographs someone sees, nothing truly prepares them for standing there. Morning mist drifts across silent canals. Church bells echo between narrow stone buildings. The gentle splash of water replaces the sound of traffic. There are no highways, no roaring engines, only footsteps, boats, and history. Every narrow alley seems to lead somewhere unexpected, a hidden courtyard, an ancient bridge, a forgotten church. Every turn feels like discovering another chapter of the past. For historians, Venice remains one of the greatest success stories ever written. A city built by refugees, a republic ruled by merchants instead of kings, an empire created through commerce rather than conquest alone. It proved that intelligence, organization, and innovation could sometimes achieve more than armies. Its influence spread across finance, banking, international trade, shipbuilding, public administration, and diplomacy. Many ideas we consider modern today first flourished within the walls of Venice. Although the Republic disappeared in 1797, its lessons remain surprisingly relevant. Strong institutions matter. Economic freedom creates opportunity. Political stability encourages prosperity. Innovation changes history. These principles transformed a muddy lagoon into one of civilization's greatest cities, and they continue to inspire the modern world. Tonight, as darkness settles over the Adriatic, the canals once again become still. The lights reflected on the water seem almost endless. A lone gondola glides quietly beneath an ancient bridge. The winged lion no longer commands an empire, but its spirit remains, watching silently over the city that refused to disappear. And perhaps that is the greatest victory Venice ever achieved.
As our long journey through the history of Venice begins to reach its final chapter, one question still remains. What did Venice truly leave behind? Was it merely a beautiful city, a powerful navy, a wealthy republic, or was its greatest gift something far greater, something that continues to shape our world today? Long after its empire disappeared, Venice continued influencing civilization, not through conquest, not through military power, but through ideas. Many of the financial systems we consider ordinary today were refined by Venetian merchants. Banks, credit, bookkeeping, international contracts, commercial insurance. These were not invented overnight. They evolved inside the busy offices overlooking the Grand Canal. Every merchant carefully recorded profits and losses. Every shipment was documented. Every agreement honored through written contracts. Trust became the foundation of commerce. Without trust, trade could never flourish. Venice also transformed diplomacy. Unlike many medieval kingdoms, the Republic preferred negotiation before war. Its ambassadors became some of Europe's most respected diplomats.
Permanent embassies, careful intelligence gathering, and detailed foreign reports became standard practice. The Republic government believed that information itself was a weapon. Knowing your rivals often mattered more than defeating them in battle. The Republic also pioneered public health. As ships constantly arrived from distant lands, they sometimes carried invisible enemies, disease, plague, unknown illnesses. Instead of allowing every vessel to dock immediately, Venice introduced strict isolation procedures. Ships were required to remain outside the city for 40 days before entering the harbor. This practice became known as quarantina. From that simple Venetian policy, the modern word quarantine was born. Even today, the world still follows a practice first perfected by the merchants of Venice. Education also flourished. Wealth created opportunity. Libraries expanded. Maps improved. Navigation became more accurate. Ship captains carried detailed charts copied by Venetian cartographers. Knowledge became another valuable commodity. Books traveled alongside spices. Ideas spread alongside silk. Venice understood that information, like commerce, could cross every border. Perhaps the Republic's greatest achievement was proving that geography does not decide destiny. Think about where Venice began. A muddy lagoon, no farmland, no forests nearby, no rivers connecting it to Europe, no valuable minerals, almost every natural disadvantage imaginable. Yet, through determination, organization, and relentless innovation, that impossible settlement became one of the richest cities in history. The Venetians refused to accept the limits placed upon them. Instead, they built their own future. Even today, architects continue studying Venice's engineering. Economists study its trade networks. Political historians admire its remarkable republican government. Military experts analyze the arsenal centuries ahead of the Industrial Revolution. Tourists admire its beauty. Scholars admire its brilliance. Very few cities have influenced so many different fields at once. As night slowly settles over the lagoon, the marble buildings begin reflecting golden lights across the still water. The crowds grow smaller. The gondolas drift quietly home. Church bells echo softly through the darkness. It becomes easy to imagine another evening, hundreds of years ago, when merchant captains returned from Alexandria, when sailors unloaded precious spices, when the Doge looked across the lagoon knowing his republic ruled the sea. Those days are gone, but their echoes remain. Every bridge, every canal, every stone, every quiet ripple upon the water, they all whisper the same remarkable story. The story of a city that should never have existed, yet changed the world forever.
And now, our journey through the remarkable history of Venice gently comes to an end. For thousands of years, countless civilizations have risen. Many became powerful. Many became wealthy. Many conquered vast lands, and almost all of them eventually disappeared. Yet Venice was different. It never possessed enormous armies. It never ruled endless continents. It never relied upon fertile farmland or precious mines. Instead, it trusted something far more powerful: human ingenuity. The first Venetians arrived as frightened refugees. They were not kings. They were not conquerors. They were ordinary families escaping destruction. Standing upon small islands surrounded by mud and saltwater, they faced a choice: give up or build something entirely new. They chose to build, one wooden pillar at a time, one small bridge at a time, one humble house at a time. Generation after generation, their impossible dreams slowly became reality. The sea shaped every part of their lives. Children learned to row before they could ride horses. Merchants became explorers. Shipbuilders became engineers. Sailors became diplomats. Even their government reflected the rhythm of the sea: patient, careful, practical. Every decision was made for the survival of the Republic, not for the glory of one ruler, but for the future of everyone.
For nearly 1,000 years, that extraordinary system worked. While kingdoms collapsed around them, Venice remained remarkably stable. Its merchants reached every corner of the known world. Its ships carried spices, silk, glass, art, and ideas. The Republic connected civilizations that rarely understood one another. East met West upon the docks of Venice. Cultures exchanged knowledge. Religions encountered one another. Commerce became a bridge between worlds. Of course, Venice was never perfect. Its leaders could be ruthless. Political rivals disappeared. Secret trials frightened even powerful nobles. Commercial interests often outweighed morality. The Fourth Crusade, which ended with the terrible sack of Constantinople, remains one of the darkest chapters in the city's history. Like every great civilization, Venice possessed both brilliance and flaws. Its greatness came not from perfection, but from its ability to adapt. Eventually, history moved forward. New trade routes crossed the Atlantic. Empire shifted westward. The Ottoman Empire challenged Venetian dominance. Napoleon finally ended the ancient republic. The Lion of St. Mark lowered its banners for the last time. Yet, some victories cannot be measured by military conquest. The republic disappeared, but the city endured. Today, millions of people travel from every corner of the world to see Venice. They stand beneath the golden mosaics of St. Mark's Basilica. They cross the Rialto Bridge. They drift quietly through narrow canals aboard black gondolas. Many arrive expecting beauty. They leave carrying something much deeper, a profound sense of wonder. Because Venice reminds us that history is not only written by kings and conquerors. Sometimes history is written by merchants, by craftsmen, by shipbuilders, by refugees who refuse to surrender. Even after 15 centuries, the city still floats. Its foundations remain hidden beneath the water. Its churches continue ringing their ancient bells. Its palaces continue reflecting across the lagoon. Its narrow streets still invite travelers to lose themselves among quiet canals and hidden courtyards. Very few places on earth preserve the past so completely. Walking through Venice feels less like visiting a city and more like stepping inside a living memory. Perhaps that is why Venice continues to fascinate us. It reminds us that impossible things sometimes become reality. A city without land became a maritime empire. A community of refugees became one of history's greatest republics. A place built upon mud became one of the most beautiful cities ever created. Its story teaches us that determination, organization, and imagination can overcome even the greatest obstacles. As the sun slowly disappears beyond the Venetian lagoon, the water becomes calm once more. The last gondolas quietly return home. Soft lights shimmer across the Grand Canal. The winged lion of St. Mark still watches silently from ancient columns, no longer guarding an empire, but guarding a story. A story that has survived wars, fires, storms, and centuries of change. A story that reminds us that while every empire must one day fade, great ideas, great courage, and extraordinary human achievement can live forever. Thank you for joining me on this peaceful journey through the remarkable history of Venice. Until our next adventure into the distant past, may your evening be calm, your dreams be peaceful, and your curiosity about history never fade. Good night.